In October 2025, a federal judge sentenced a former Qualcomm vice president for orchestrating a breathtaking $180 million fraud scheme, selling the company Microchip technology it legally already owned. Karim Arabi secretly developed the technology while employed, hid his involvement behind a shell company, and impersonated his own sister to sell it back to his employer. This wasn't external espionage, but a trusted insider exploiting a blind spot in intellectual property controls. How does a global leader in technology buy its own work? A global technology leader does not forget what it owns. It is deliberately misled. The vulnerability wasn't a flaw in a database or a firewall. It was a trusted executive. Karim Arabi was the ultimate insider, a vice president of engineering who had spent years inside Qualcomm's most secure and profitable divisions. While the company pursued an ambitious pivot away from mobile handsets, a strategy targeting $40 billion in new revenue streams, Arabi was given near unfettered access to core intellectual property. While the C-suite focused on this massive corporate realignment, Arabi was given near unfettered access to the core intellectual property underpinning that growth. He didn't just access the technology, he helped create them, holding the blueprints to the company's future. His colleagues saw a brilliant engineer, a crucial leader guiding the company toward its projected $15 billion in annual data center revenue. In one of the world's largest semiconductor corporations, the word of senior technical leadership was doctrine. The deference given to senior technical leadership made challenging their work almost unthinkable, creating an operational silo built on trust. Every complex project, every sensitive pipeline relied on this chain of trust. Arabi was a critical link. The early promise he showed had solidified into a reputation that placed him beyond suspicion, beyond question. But this deep institutional reliance, designed to accelerate innovation, had also created a profound and exploitable blind spot. The executive entrusted with stewarding the company's intellectual property had co-founded a shadow startup called Abrizio, hiding his involvement while marketing Qualcomm's own technology back to it for $150 million. And the bill was about to come due. Script. NTHE architecture of the fraud was not a hack, it was a corruption of process. Arabi began by creating a ghost company. NNHE set up a shell company, Abrizio, using his sister as a front to stay hidden. He registered a shell corporation, a legal phantom, a name and a bank account, built to hold technology that, under his employment agreement, already belonged to Qualcomm. But with a signature, .NN with the vulnerability proven, the question was no longer can the system could be beaten. It was how fast it could be bled dry. No lab, no IP. Its sole purpose was to be a mirror, reflecting the company's own innovations back at it, for a price. And when, from his privileged vantage point, he developed new microchip technology that, under his employment agreement, already belonged to Qualcomm. From his privileged vantage point, he developed new microchip technology that, under his employment agreement, already belonged to Qualcomm. From his privileged vantage point, he developed new microchip technology that, under his employment agreement, already belonged to Qualcomm, a design he himself had overseen. He then concealed his involvement, presenting the breakthrough as a critical external solution, essential for the company's roadmap. NHE then orchestrated the proposal. NHE then orchestrated the proposal. He then orchestrated the proposal. To finance and legal, the proposal appeared routine. A trusted VP had identified a necessary component. A vendor was ready to supply it, Nanyet BUT with a signature. With the vulnerability proven, the question was no longer if the system could be beaten, it was how fast it could be bled dry. NTHE recommendation bore the weight of the VP of R&D himself, disguised as an outside vendor's pitch. NNTHE elaborate deception was designed to bypass such scrutiny. NNTHE paperwork was immaculate. NTHE recommendation came from the VP of R&D himself, masked behind the vendor's paperwork. Arabi had buried his role, filing patents in his sister's name to conceal his own involvement, as she had even changed her last name from Arabi to Allen to mask their relationship. The paperwork was immaculate. The recommendation came from the highest echelon of engineering authority, the very person hired to make such calls. No one in procurement was qualified to audit the technical originality of the license. They were processing an invoice, not cross-referencing the company's patent portfolio against a vendor's claim. They were processing what looked like a routine acquisition, not a betrayal by their own VPN. They were processing a routine recommendation, not unraveling a conspiracy from within. NNTHE system was built on trust. Arabi had weaponized it. NNTHE first payment was approved. NNTHE first payment was approved. The first payment was approved. NNTHE company had just unknowingly paid $150 million for technology that was already its own. NNTHE fraud began not with a bang. NNTHE fraud began not with a bang. The fraud, a scheme that would eventually bleed $180 million from the corporate body, began not with a bang, but with a signature. With the vulnerability proven, the question was no longer Chennai was ne presumpta system could be beaten. It was how fast it could be bled dry. Success breeds repetition. And for Arabi, the first payment was a proof of concept. The fraud became a machine, a quiet, systematic scheme, disguised as a legitimate technology acquisition. For years, payments flowed from Qualcomm to a shell corporation, an empty vessel with no employees and no real office, which existed only to receive and redirect cash. Approvals followed a system built on trust. The total climbed and climbed. $150 million paid out to acquire the shell for technology that already belonged to Qualcomm. Federal prosecutors would later value the entire scheme at $180 million. But a wound that deep has a heartbeat. It leaves a rhythm in the ledgers. A routine internal audit, not a person, but an algorithm sifting through millions of lines of financial data, flagged an anomaly. Arabi had developed it under his employment agreement, then sold it back to his own company through a front he secretly controlled. Qualcomm had unknowingly paid a shell company for Microchip technology Arabi had invented as an employee, technology that already belonged to Qualcomm. What began as a financial query escalated into a forensic investigation. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division and the Department of Justice traced the money's path. The funds were funneled to his co-conspirators and his sister, then laundered through layers of accounts and investments. The charges were stark: wire fraud and money laundering. The arrest of a vice president of R&D sent shockwaves through the industry. The machine was broken. The scheme was over. But the accounting, a reckoning measured in federal indictments and shattered reputations, had just begun. The gavel fell, not on a debate, but on a verdict that read like an invoice for betrayal. 48 months. Full restitution. The federal judge sentenced Karim Arabi, once a senior vice president, to prison for orchestrating a scheme to sell Qualcomm its own technology for $180 million. The company paid $150 million before the fraud surfaced. Nearly $92 million funneled to his sister. For Arabi, the cell door closed. For Qualcomm, the audit began. The scheme had exploited a simple, fatal flaw: a culture of unchecked trust. So the company ripped that culture out by the roots. New protocols layered oversight onto oversight. Procurement, validation, and payment, a triad of functions once siloed, were welded together. The goal was a system so convoluted, so cross-examined, that no single person could ever again approve a payment for a technology that didn't exist. The era of executive autonomy was over, replaced by a labyrinth of checks and balances. But you cannot scrub a scandal from the market's memory. Qualcomm, a titan built on the sanctity of its intellectual property, had been the victim of a calculated fraud by its own executive, selling it its own tech, a humiliation that echoed in every competitor's boardroom. The procedural fixes were necessary. It was also a scarlet letter. The prison sentence settled the man's account. But the corporation's balance sheet, with its shareholders, its partners, its own identity, that was still open. The new system was built. The question lingered, heavy in the boardroom silence. When the expert you hire to guard the vault is the one who holds the key, what, exactly, are you protecting? The most dangerous vulnerability isn't in the code. It's in the org chart. Qualcomm's $180 million lesson is a blueprint for a blind spot that haunts the knowledge economy. The expert you empower to build the vault is the same one you've given the only key. The premise sounds logical. Specialized authority is essential for speed. The hidden fragility? That authority creates information silos where trust replaces verification. The trigger is an insider who understands the system's fatal flaw. Its deference to expertise is its greatest vulnerability. The fallout, a $180 million loss, is simply the invoice for that misplaced trust. The strategic lesson is this: governance must scale with complexity. When intellectual property is the core business, its protection cannot be delegated solely to its creators. Verification cannot be the responsibility of the person recommending the action. This requires a culture of trust but verify, built into the concrete and steel of the process itself. Independent technical audits for significant procurement, cross-functional reviews that separate the what from the how, accountability structures that assume even the most trusted insider is a potential point of failure. The goal is not to eliminate trust. The goal is to build a fortress robust enough that trust isn't its only wall. The blueprints must be watched by someone other than the architect. A $180 million monument to the idea that no single person should hold all the keys. If this analysis of the Qualcomm $180 million fraud helped you see the warning signs, a like helps us reach more curious minds. In the comments, what is the single most effective control to prevent an expert from exploiting their own authority?